Safeguarding, it's a huge topic, and one that's quite difficult to define. At its core, it's about protecting vulnerable adults, children and young people against harm and abuse. In this special edition of Island Life, exploitation is the key word, and we'll be hearing from a whole host of agencies from across the island to highlight the exploitation that takes place here and the services and support available to help tackle it. I'm Siobhán Fletcher, and this is Safeguarding the Isle of Man. So, what is safeguarding then? Well, overseeing this work year-round is the Isle of Man Safeguarding Board. It's chaired by Leslie Walker, a qualified social worker with nearly 40 years of experience. I spoke to her about her role in this bigger picture.
So the role of the board is to bring all of the agencies that are involved in safeguarding, the government departments and others, onto this independent safeguarding board. And the role of the board is to work with those agencies, bringing them together to do joined up pieces of work, but also to get assurance that agencies are working in the way that they need to and the most effective way to ensure that local citizens are safeguarded from abuse and harm.
This week in particular, we're talking about exploitation, all ages. So can you sort of explain to me what that looks like on the island and how the Safeguarding Board goes about tackling it?
In 2021, we actually launched an exploitation strategy. We had a big conference, and that introduced some new ways of working that focused on safeguarding children and young people as the first stage. And we developed a whole new toolkit to support staff in knowing how best to work with exploitation. And that was with all of the partner agencies round the table, taking a really sort of proactive approach. And then since then, we've been out to evaluate the impact of some of that work, to look at where we need to strengthen some of the practice and support practitioners who work daily out in the field with some very difficult situations, to work alongside them to think how we can best support and improve their practice. And then since then, we've been very keen to really get a focus on exploitation in terms of adults, and particularly vulnerable adults who would be at most risk from exploiters, which are, can be individuals or a group, often organised crime, so are deliberately targeting those that they may feel are vulnerable. So they're through either force, control, coercion, manipulation, or deceit, and for often, obviously, their financial advantage or power or control. And so, that can have a whole range of presentations. So particularly for adults, it can involve actually organised crime, individuals taking over a person's home for criminal purposes, which is known as cuckooing, for obvious reasons. They're coming in effectively to take over and use that person's address for illegal activities, whether it be storing, selling drugs, and a whole range of things. It can also be forcing vulnerable adults into modern slavery, forced labour, forced servitude, running up debt bondages. So, it can be really complex, and these are highly organised individuals, often, that are targeting both our young people and vulnerable adults. Very sophisticated. Obviously, we know that our local police have been very focused on organised crime groups. The Constabulary have been really, as you'll see in the media, been bringing in a number of arrests and convictions of perpetrators on the island, and focusing on ports and areas particularly where drugs can be brought in illegally, which just often fuels the whole aspect of criminal exploitation, which is only one form of exploitation.
Alongside the Safeguarding Board, another key body overseeing safeguarding on the island is the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, or MASH for short. The MASH is a multi-agency, multidisciplinary team that brings together professionals from services like Manx Care's children's social care and adult social work teams, its early help team, broader health professionals, and officers from the Isle of Man Constabulary. We're going to be hearing more about the MASH throughout this programme. But starting us off, Sam Cannell is the Isle of Man Constabulary's Detective Inspector for Protecting Vulnerable People. He told me the police's approach to safeguarding has changed a lot in recent years.
And I'd say that up until certainly 2019, 2020, we weren't using the word exploitation and labelling this horrific thing properly, and therefore not recognising it. And I think with the onset of COVID and the fact that we closed our borders and we had more control as to who was coming and going from the island, and we had tighter restrictions around the importation of our post to the island, that really helped to expose the issue of certainly our younger community and our juveniles were being approached by those that would seek to exploit them with the purpose of importing controlled drugs via the post and using them either to accept or to deliver packages, parcels, etc. And certainly that demographic allowed us to recognise to the greatest extent what the problem was on the island. And I think from there, in collaboration with getting the multi-agency safeguarding hub up and running and working more closely with our partners in social care, in health and with education, that it's really helped us to come together to form a structure for how we can actually tackle exploitation. And when I say exploitation, what I mean is child criminal exploitation, for instance, the drug trafficking trade, which is often referred to in the UK as county lines, or it could be child sexual exploitation, which we know does happen on the island as it does elsewhere. It just may not be as visible as other forms of exploitation. And then in addition to this, we have certain vulnerable adults that live in our communities that, for the reasons around their vulnerability, they are preyed upon by those that would seek to exploit them. And that could be in the same way, or it could quite simply be because they have a home address that these people want to use to either frequent and use to deal drugs from, or to receive parcels and packages themselves.
So you mentioned, tackling exploitation, particularly since COVID and the tighter borders as well. I mean, how do the police tackle this big topic? And also, what advice, I suppose, do you have for parents or carers who maybe are worried about their kids?
Yeah, so I think it's true to say in this day and age, the access to children and young people by those that would seek to exploit them is far greater than it ever was. For instance, everybody's got a mobile phone in their pocket now. Everybody's got access to social media, various social media platforms and messaging platforms, which are really hard and can be sometimes difficult to infiltrate. However, a large part of the constabulary's work is around pursuing offenders. So if we receive information and intelligence which supports somebody being exploited, the constabulary, whilst working with our partners to support that vulnerable person and to hopefully remove them from that situation, the constabulary's focus is on the perpetrator and how we can target that person. So whether that be by virtue of arrest, investigating any offences that have been committed, or by just taking some real proactive and direct action towards that person to make it really difficult for them to operate in that environment, is certainly what we would do as our priority in that instance.
OK, so we've heard from the Isle of Man Safeguarding Board and the police, but what about those on the front lines in our island's health and social care spaces? I sat down with Manx Care's named professional for contextual safeguarding, Samantha Holmes, and the head of safeguarding for children and adults, Terry Banks, who covers the acute and community health services here on the island. They told me safeguarding is everybody's business.
Since Terry came into post, we have a duty team. We are visible across Manx Care, and that is where any child or even adult comes through our front door, so the emergency department, and we would follow either that child or that adult throughout their journey throughout the hospital and then out into the community. We do have the risk indicator checklist tool, which is embedded again across Manx Care. So where those conversations where somebody might be admitted into our emergency department where you're just thinking something's not quite right and you've got that funny feeling in your chest. So you want to capture that adult's voice when they might not have one, and then equally that child's voice when they've not got one. And it's to allow that professional to fully explore what is the reason why this young person or adult has come into our service, for care, and is there anything else that's outside of that? So is it a genuine admission, they are really unwell and they just need some of our nurses and doctors to support them, or is there a safeguarding concern? And then that's where our team would obviously explore that with the professionals, and then obviously referrals, timely referrals I would have to say, are made to ensure that we've got a multi-agency response. I think we need to be really mindful that a child or an adult is never going to come into any service and say, I am being exploited. And I think we need to really be clear as well, is that they may not know that they are being exploited. So it could be really subtle things. So it could be some of our children are going missing from home. So why are they going missing from home? What are they frightened of? It could be that they have come in through our emergency department having taken an overdose, self-harmed, they might be intoxicated. Now, you could look at the intoxication and look at the age of the child. Is this just normal teenage, risk-taking behaviour, or are they trying to get away from something? Are they trying to mask something? Are they frightened about something? Or is there somebody giving them that alcohol, which obviously then you need to fully explore in terms of, are they being exploited? When you look at the age of them, they're not old enough to buy the alcohol. Equally, if they're not working, then where are they getting the money from to buy that alcohol? So it's just having to be professionally curious and really having that think family approach around it.
We're quite nosy. We ask the right questions to whether that be an adult or a young person. If we've got a teenage pregnancy, for example, and they say, we ask who the boyfriend is, how they've met them. Is that through the internet? Is it Snapchat? We explore it just in case there's any exploitation going on, because some of these, specifically the young girls, are in that it's my boyfriend type model. They're not aware that they're being groomed, for example. So we're very, very professionally curious in respect to pregnancies. And also as well, the more subtle signs is who are they with. So if you've got a person 15 or 16 and they've got an adult with them, we need to know, has that person got PR for them, or is that somebody that's brought them in because they're being exploited? So we have to be really professional curious, and we use what we call a reachable moment.
So what exactly is that reachable moment then?
So this is a terminology that was embedded in the UK really after the murder of a young boy he was involved in a gang. He was being exploited, and basically when the police spoke to him, they missed some opportunities to safeguard him prior to his death, and that's called a reachable moment. So what we do, we know that if someone comes in, they've got that nurturing response from one of our staff, are you okay? That's your reachable moment to try and get them to disclose what might be happening to them. And if they don't disclose, we use something called assertive outreach. So they'll leave the hospital, for example, and we don't leave that, we go out again, that would be Sam, to see them 1, 2, 3 or 4 times. You definitely get that reachable moment, mainly within the ED departments, I have to say, or on the wards, but you can also get a disclosure after, keep going out, and that never stop, we don't give up on them really.
I suppose in terms of exploitation, you mentioned there's criminal and there's sexual. We touched on this with Sam Cannell as well, and I spoke to him from the police. It's not kind of, if there's a parent or a carer listening, we're not trying to scare them in any way. But, in terms of red flags, there's a whole range of exploitation that maybe we see on the island and stuff that maybe people don't realise is exploitation. Can you run me through some of the things that you see, I suppose, in your jobs?
So it can be subtle changes. So it could be a child that is more than happy to go to school, has got good, educational attainment, is doing really well, and then all of a sudden they don't want to go to school. Or the parents or the teachers might see that the grades are slightly changing. Equally, it could be that they are missing from home. They can have a completely different change in friendship group. Technology, they're constantly on the phone more than what they've normally been. They're becoming very secretive. Coming to police attention, frequent attendances up at, the emergency department. And this is not just ones that are set in stone, but these are some of the things that as a parent or carer, you could be mindful of. Like I say, it's very, very hard that some of this is, that adolescent normal, behaviour where they do change, the friendship groups. But again, certainly from a health perspective, it is about being professionally curious. Why has that young person, decided not to go to school? Why, have they changed their friendship groups? And why have they got all of these attendances up to the hospital or even the GP?
So now we've heard from the various agencies that work together in the island's multi-agency safeguarding hub. Remember, that's the MASH. Well, now we're going to hear how they would come together to work on a case. To demonstrate and to avoid accidentally replicating any real cases, I asked Mrs. Holmes to create a fictional case study for me, which I then presented to my interviewees to discuss. So let me introduce you to Harriet.
Harriet is 15 and in her final year at school. She's predicted good grades and she's wishing to go to college when she leaves school. Harriet's hoping to study health and social care and wishes to pursue a career in nursing. Harriet's friends have fallen out with her because one of her friend's boyfriends shared that he liked her. Now there are rumours going around school that she slept with him and they're calling her really mean things. This doesn't stop when Harriet gets home. Snapchat and WhatsApp messages of images of Harriet being altered to depict her in a state of undress are being sent around school. Harriet starts to miss lessons to avoid some of her friends. Her grades soon start to decline and her parents are called in to discuss. During this time, Harriet receives a message off a young boy who reports he's 16 and who she doesn't know. "Hey beautiful," the message reads. Harriet responds, "Do I know you?" He replies with, "No, but I'd like to get to know you." Harriet and Luke begin to message late into the night. Over the next few days, pictures and many messages are sent between the two, until one day, Luke asks to meet up. They plan for Harriet to skip school and meet at his flat when his parents are out. Harriet meets Luke as she gets off the bus, and he looks older than 16. But she continues as he's being friendly. When they're at Luke's, they have vodka and Harriet feels drunk. Harriet falls asleep, and when she wakes up, she realises school finished hours ago. She looks at her phone, and she has 32 missed calls from her parents. She tries to leave, but Luke persuades her to stay, telling her he's falling in love with her. He also confesses that he's 32 years old. During the next day, Harriet feels scared to try to leave. Young boys come to the flat and drop off parcels for Luke. In return, they receive vapes, and some get money. Harriet watches one boy get punched to the floor because a parcel has gone missing. A day later, Harriet makes a run for it and heads to the local shops to ask for help.
Whilst Harriet is fictional, she is based on many cases Mrs. Holmes has personally dealt with. So I asked her what would be the first steps in tackling this sort of situation.
So Harriet would be discussed in our daily exploitation meeting, and looking at the case study and how I've created it, I've tried to cover everything within the case study just to give everybody that snapshot and a bit more of an overview of what we do from a health perspective. So more than likely this would have come into our daily exploitation meeting that, school have got some concerns that she's not attending, and obviously the friendship group has changed. More than likely my first point of call with Harriet would be contacting either Harriet or her parents in relation to her going missing, and again capitalising on that missing from home episode during that return home interview, looking at where you were. Was it a planned, obviously, to go missing? Was it impulsive? Who was you with? Where did you go? Really gathering as much information as I can. And then obviously as part of that return home interview, I do explore their emotional and their health well-being and how I can support them. And obviously I look at substance misuse as well, any alcohol intake, so I would capture all of that. With Harriet, I would definitely be seeing her again. It wouldn't be a one-off visit. I would offer a responsive visit in terms of what's going on for her, because there's concerns there in terms of the pictures that are being shared, and obviously the alcohol, and then obviously that element of grooming as well, and then being held in that flat. So that is how I would be in contact with Harriet.
What would the police's involvement look like then? We're going to hear from Sam Cannell again now.
So this scenario is around a girl who is being groomed and will likely go on to be exploited either sexually or criminally. And at the point that she manages to escape the situation physically and run away from the address, she would then come to parents, I would imagine, and vis-a-vis onto multi-agency to step in. Now, from the constabulary's point of view, we would work with the family, work with the child that's been exploited to find out information in relation to what is this address, who is this person, how did you meet them, what comms information can we get to support an evidential conviction and an investigation. And then really we would be targeting that perpetrator, and we'd be not only looking at contact that they've had with that child, but also what is their risk to other people, to other children or other vulnerable adults. Because if they've been able to go to the extent of purporting to be a 16-year-old when in fact they're over 30, then that is grooming behaviour, and there is a specific offence around grooming of which we would be investigating for sure.
I suppose when we talk about the conversations within MASH, I mean, when all the different agencies meet up, do you devise a strategy? So in that scenario, are you saying, right, as the police, we're going to go and do this, the safeguarding team under Manx Care, you're going to go and do this? It's like a sort of that multi-agency working together to form a strategy really on how you deal with these cases?
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. We all have various roles. We all have things that we're good at as well. So the police have powers of arrest, we have powers to investigate, and we have recognised offences that we can investigate with a view to prosecution. A lot of the time we also wear a uniform, which can be a barrier for people wanting to come and speak to us. So that being the case, then it might be better actually for one of our colleagues in health, for instance, or social care, to approach and to speak and to try and understand what that child's gone through and the experiences that they've had. But we will absolutely use that information where we can and with consent, and where we see that the risk is significant, we will take steps to basically flex our muscles and to target that perpetrator behaviour.
Jumping back to health and social care, Mrs Holmes' return home interview could lead to further lines of inquiry.
So obviously, again, with consent, the return home interview would be shared with police in terms of closing that missing from home episode down, and then along with obviously social care, because sometimes in some cases, again, it's just adolescent behaviour, so it doesn't need to go anywhere. It can just be closed down. But obviously in Harriet's case, there is a significant concern there for sexual exploitation, and obviously the alcohol that she's been given as well. And then what she's then gone on to witness with the boys that have attended the flat as well.
Would you be concerned in this case about other kids involved, whether Harriet's the only case, or would you then be trying to work out, who else has been impacted then?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be my role, to go off and find out who these children are, but, through conversation with Harriet, I would gather that information. Police would then obviously find out, who these children are there any concerns? More than likely, these other children would have been reported missing, and they may be known to services already. And again, the same support that I would be offering to Harriet, I would be offering, to the young people that have been obviously within the flat. More than likely, how we would pick, one of the boys up in there is obviously at the end of the case study where she witnesses him being punched to the floor. He potentially could have come through our emergency department, and this is where it's really important, where our nurses, doctors, any health professional is utilising that risk indicator checklist tool, because more than likely they may have said, we've just had a little bit of a fight, but actually we need to explore it.
Manx Care's head of safeguarding, Terry Banks, sums the MASH's work up in 3 words. She says they have to think the unthinkable.
Also, as part of the return home interview, we would also try and ascertain if there's been any sexual contact between Harriet and Luke, because obviously she's taken alcohol and she's fallen asleep. So you've always got to think, as Laming said, think the unthinkable. So it would be a way of teasing those questions really out of Harriet, and just to see, because if that was the case, that was when we would call on our SART colleagues to see if there was any forensics needed doing, or if she needed any emergency contraception, or indeed any medical assistance. So that all forms part of the picture when you're asking the questions. We'd think the unthinkable, but just make sure that obviously every need, that even if it's not apparent, and sometimes people won't tell you unless you ask, so we'd have to ask.
She also says Harriet would be supported going forwards. This would not be a one strategy meeting and done type situation.
Well, because the information's shared, so school would be involved in either the strategy meeting or the DEN meeting. We've got school nurses within the organisation, so they'd also be aware of what's happened to Harriet. So if she was still in school, there'd be that support from the school nursing service. There'd be ongoing support from the Sexual Assault Referral Centre, and also if this male of concerns and being arrested and there's going to be a criminal trial, the support via us through that. We don't just deal with the issue and then not see the child again, because you know yourself, these processes can take a long time. So it's regular phone calls, sometimes a coffee with Sam, and we keep that nurturing. And it's a very difficult time for parents as well. So we can support the parents as much as we can in respect of what's going on with her health needs, and the police in respect of the ongoing police inquiry.
In young people like Harriet, there are a whole range of warning signs that they might be being targeted. They include, but by no means are limited to, receiving game currency and other gifts within games, children who are travelling alone and look frightened, maybe have no tickets or money to pay for travel, children travelling alone at night, a child or a young person who allows others to speak for them when addressed directly, those under the influence of alcohol or drugs. They could be receiving excessive texts or phone calls. They might have been given a new mobile phone. If a young person has access to drugs or alcohol but maybe has no means to buy it, are they going missing more frequently, or are they involved in criminal activity? If you think you or someone you know is being exploited or is at risk of being exploited, please feel free to contact the Isle of Man Constabulary at the police headquarters on 631 212, or you can anonymously call Crimestoppers on 0800 555 111. There are also lots of other avenues you can go down, and you can find all the contact information you need at manxradio.com. Or if you're listening back to this programme as a podcast, all the information you need will be in that information tab alongside the audio. Thank you so much for listening to this special Island Life. I've been Siobhán Fletcher, and this has been Safeguarding the Isle of Man.